Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. In occupied Kashmir, the family of 3 missing Kashmiris have alleged the trio was killed in a fake encounter by the Indian Army. It said they identified the 3 from photos posted on social media after the July 18 operation in the Shopian district, bringing back memories of past cases of extrajudicial killings in the Muslim-majority region. Pakistan's Foreign Office has condemned the killing of the 3 civilians. The Iraqi military says a Turkish drone has killed 2 border guards and the driver of the vehicle they were traveling in near the Iranian border. In a statement, the military called the attack a flagrant aggression. Turkey regularly carries out attacks against PKK militants in northern Iraq. Belarus opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya has fled to Lithuania after disputing presidential elections she claimed were rigged. Lithuania's foreign minister Rinas Linkvicius says Tikhanovskaya has joined her children and she is safe there. Protests continue in Belarus after controversial polls results gave President Alexander Lukashenko 80% of the vote. Those are the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. In occupied Kashmir, the family of 3 missing Kashmiris have alleged the trio was killed in a fake encounter by the Indian Army. It said they identified the 3 from photos posted on social media after the July 18 operation in the Shopian district, bringing back the memories of past cases of extrajudicial killings in the Muslim-majority region. The family said the 3 victims were laborers. Pakistan's Foreign Office has condemned extrajudicial killings of civilians in occupied Kashmir. It said India is trying to subjugate the Kashmiri people through killings, torture and forced disappearances. The Indian Army has killed over 200 people since it revoked the autonomy of Kashmir in August last year. Subsequently, thousands of politicians, lawyers and activists were thrown into jail to silent dissent. In Pakistan, a top-level army huddle welcomes the progress in the Afghan reconciliation process. The military's media wing said the forum hoped for the early commencement of the intra-Afghan talks. The Corps Commanders Conference also reviewed the situation along the line of control and the border with Afghanistan. It also discussed the geostrategic and national security situation of the country. Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa hailed the operational readiness of the troops. He also appreciated the Army's efforts for assisting the government to contain the COVID-19 pandemic and the locust threat. China says the Afghan lawyer Jaga's decision to release Taliban prisoners will create favorable conditions for intra-Afghan dialogue in the country. At a news briefing in Beijing, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian welcomed the step as an enabling measure. Zhao said the release of the prisoners will help establish mutual trust between Kabul and the Taliban. Earlier, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani signed the decree to free the remaining 400 Taliban under the Doha peace deal after the lawyer Jaga passed their release. China's top legislature has extended the mandate for the current group of Hong Kong lawmakers for a year. The decision means Hong Kong's Legislative Council will continue to perform for a year until the next LegCo starts its 4-year term. The Standing Committee of China's National People's Congress supported the Hong Kong government's decision to July 31st to postpone elections for a year. The top legislature said the decision was necessary and appropriate. The pro-democracy camp had been aiming to win with a historic majority in the September 6 elections. The Legislative Council election would have been the first vote in the city since the introduction of the national security law. The Iraqi military says a Turkish drone has killed 2 border guards and the driver of the vehicle they were traveling in near the Iranian border. In the statement, the military called the attack a flagrant aggression. Turkey regularly carries out attacks against PKK militants, which has bases in northern Iraq. On Sunday, Turkey's defense minister Hulusi Akar said 83 PKK terrorists have been killed as part of Turkey's cross-border anti-terror operations. A recent U.S. military report found that PKK militants continue to recruit children to take part in their operations. In Iran, the courts have convicted 2 men of spying for Germany, Israel and the UK in separate cases. In a statement, judiciary spokesman Ghulam Hussain Ismaili said the men were sentenced for 10 years in prison. Authorities have arrested 5 more people for alleged espionage in different ministries and in Iran's atomic agency. Their identities have not been revealed yet. Earlier, Iran announced several detentions and executions of the people found guilty of spying by its courts. Lebanese President Michel Aoun has accepted the government's resignation over the last week's massive explosion in Beirut, but Aoun has asked the government to stay as caretaker until a new cabinet is formed. Yesterday, Prime Minister Hassan Diab resigned, saying the explosion was a result of endemic corruption. More in this report.
The devastating Beirut blast has landed a politically volatile Lebanon in turmoil once again. Following 3 ministers' resignations, Prime Minister Hassan Diab stepped down along with his entire cabinet. Diab said his government has done everything to save the country, but corrupt elements are trying to score political points. He said his cabinet followed the will of the people to hold those responsible accountable for the disaster. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says reformation is the need of the hour for Lebanon.
It is important that a credible and transparent investigation determine the cause of the explosion and bring about the accountability demanded by the Lebanese people. It is also important that reforms be implemented so as to address the needs of the Lebanese people for the longer term.
Lebanon's UN envoy Amal Modalai thanked the world community for extending moral and financial support amid the time of crisis. She said the Lebanese people's demands for accountability after the Beirut explosion are justified.
The pandemic added to the misery of people and compounded their sense of loss and insecurity. Their challenge was a matter of life, of economic hardship, or death by a cruel virus. Then came the explosion. It shattered Beirut, and with it, what was left of the social and financial security. People are desperate now, angry and afraid. They are demanding and deserve justice, and rightly so.
Lebanon's cabinet's resignation comes amid violent protests over the government's handling of the explosion crisis. Officials estimate that the blast has caused up to $15 billion damage to a country already suffering from a deep financial crisis.
Moving on, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation says Israel's plan to annex Palestinian land is a flagrant violation of international law and human rights. The bloc's human rights body said it calls on the global community to hold Tel Aviv accountable for rights violations. It said Palestinians should be helped to exercise the right to self-determination. Earlier, Jordan said it will look positively on the creation of the binational state that guarantees equal rights for Israelis and Palestinians. Israeli annexation can lead to about 4.5% of Palestinians in the West Bank living within enclaved territory. Last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his plan to annex parts of the Israeli-occupied West Bank is not off the table yet. He said the matter of annexation resides with the United States. Meanwhile, Israel has decided to close Gaza's main commercial trade route, the Karim Abdus Salim crossing. State media said all entries except humanitarian aid and fuel oil will be banned. It's the Defense Minister Benny Gantz ordered the closure due to the continued launching of incendiary balloons from Gaza. Palestinian officials say Israeli authorities had been preventing the entry of construction material to the Palestinian side. Earlier, Israel said 12 fires broke out yesterday due to the launching of the balloons in the 5 residential areas near its border with the Gaza Strip. Egyptians are voting of the two-day election to choose members of a newly created Senate with COVID-19 protocols. The Council of Senators will be an advisory body without legislative powers. It will include 200 publicly elected members and 100 appointed by the president. Nearly 63 million out of total population of more than 100 million Egyptians are eligible to vote in the Senate elections. Critics say the elections are aimed to gain power, but the government says it will give minorities a voice. The poll's results will be announced on August the 19th. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Globally, the number of coronavirus infections has exceeded 20 million with nearly 737,000 deaths. The US is leading with the most confirmed infections at 5 million, followed by Brazil with over 3 million cases. India is third with more than 2.2 million cases after reporting over 53,000 infections and 871 deaths in the past 24 hours. More in this report.
Governments are battling economic recession and overwhelmed healthcare systems, but COVID-19 continues to dominate. The virus continues to batter the Americas. The US President Donald Trump has not been able to garner support of the Democrats on his executive orders for a second economic relief package.
It's a responsibility for the states to pick up 25% of the costs. As you can see from this slide, that cost would inure to the state of California, its taxpayers, roughly $700 million per week. If that fund, and it's a fund that has limited resources, $70 billion currently, if that fund drops to $25 billion or less, then those federal dollars disappear.
In Europe, Germany continues to report new infections, but so far the country's healthcare system has not been overwhelmed. Globally, states are easing restrictions, and the World Health Organization has urged caution and called for localized lockdowns.
Countries in Western Europe in general have suppressed the majority of virus transmission and are now seeing flare-ups of that disease. The trick for them now is to really focus on identifying those clusters of disease, identifying any new community transmission, and putting in place the kind of localized measures that can contain the virus, suppress the virus, and reduce exposure, and try to avoid, if possible, having the sort of countrywide lockdowns that had did so much economic damage before.
In Australia, cases in the state of Victoria are finally declining, but in the New South Wales, the outbreak is picking up pace. In Asia, locally transmitted cases continue to emerge as regional countries battle to hit the zero mark.
Moreover, in India, the COVID-19 surge continues as 871 more people have lost their lives overnight. Over 53,000 tested positive in the past 24 hours, with the tally crossing 2.2 million despite a 140-day long lockdown. The health ministry says the death toll has crossed over 45,000. Is that health officials will now perform duties during their quarantine period. Meanwhile, a ministry official said two cabinet ministers, Kandasamy and Kamalakanan, have contracted the disease. The ministry said the flights will remain suspended to Kolkata from 6 high COVID-19 prevalence cities till August the 31st. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, the COVID-19 mortality rate has fallen as 15 people lost their lives to the virus in the past 24 hours, raising the toll to 6,112. The health ministry said 531 cases were reported overnight as the tally crossed 285,000. The ministry said over 261,000 people have recovered from the virus so far. It said there are over 17,000 active cases in the country, among which 780 are in critical condition. Sindh remains the worst hit province with over 124,000 infections, while Punjab has reported more than 94,000 cases. Niger's government has extended a state of emergency to the entire region surrounding the capital Niamey, where 6 French workers were killed. A French charity which employed the aid workers said it had temporarily suspended its activities in Niger. In a tweet, President Emmanuel Macron said France would bolster security to protect its nationals in West Africa's Sahel region. France has deployed over 5,000 troops in the arid region south of the Sahara Desert. In Sudan, the trial of the former president Omar al-Bashir has been delayed at the request of his defense lawyer. The court had set the second hearing of the trial for 11th of August. The trial of the ex-president over the military coup opened with a brief hearing in July. Omar al-Bashir can face death penalty if convicted over the overthrow of the democratically elected government of Prime Minister Sadiq al-Mahdi. Bashir stayed in power for 30 years before being overthrown in April last year after several months of street demonstrations. Germany says murder of a Georgian national in Berlin has affected bilateral ties with Russia. Victim Zalim Khan Khagushvili was shot twice in the head in a central Berlin park in August 2019 when he was going to a mosque. Speaking in Moscow, Foreign Minister Heiko Maas said issues like murder in Berlin park and cyber attack on German parliament should be openly addressed. German prosecutors had blamed the murder on a branch of the Russian state. In December 2019, Germany expelled 2 Russian embassy employees over the lack of cooperation in the investigation. Victim Khangushvili had previously fought alongside anti-Moscow separatists in Russia's autonomous region of Chechnya. Responding, Russia said it would retaliate against Germany's unfriendly move. Russia says it has developed the first novel coronavirus vaccine and will begin mass production soon. At a meeting, President Vladimir Putin has declared Russia as the first country to register a COVID-19 vaccine. President Putin thanked Health Minister Mikhail Murashko and said that the cure works effectively as his own daughter has also been vaccinated. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization says it is in talks with Russia for the body's pre-qualification of the COVID-19 vaccine. Spokesman Tariq Jasarevich said WHO will conduct a thorough investigation of the data and safety protocols from the clinical trials. This vaccine has been jointly developed by the Gamaleya Research Institute and the Russian Defense Ministry. It's time for a short break. We'll be back with more stories. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Bolivia's government has ordered the military to protect key installations amid protests by the opposition calling for a quick election. La Paz has also ordered the security forces to transport medical oxygen amid clashes and roadblocks set up by the opposition. Authorities say the blockades are affecting oxygen supplies with hospital equipment for patients running low on oxygen. Hospital officials allege 33 people have died in hospitals due to the lack of oxygen. Supporters of the now exiled former president Evo Morales demand the vote to be held on September the 6th instead of October the 18th. Exiled in Argentina, Morales has accused the interim administration of leading a coup while encouraging protests against the delay in the elections. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Belarus opposition leader Svetlana Tikhonovskaya has fled to Lithuania after disputing presidential elections she claimed were rigged. In a video message, the opposition leader said she made a difficult decision of her children. Lithuania's foreign minister Linas Linkevicius says Tikhonovskaya has joined her children and she is safe there. This comes as protests continue in Belarus after the poll results gave President Alexander Lukashenko 80% of the vote. Earlier, Tikhonovskaya claimed to have won the election and called on the authorities to relinquish power peacefully. Britain and France have agreed to work swiftly to finalize a new plan for shutting down a migrant route across the English Channel. In a statement, UK's Immigration Minister Chris Phillips said the French government has also agreed that these illegal crossings are unacceptable. Phillips said France agreed to mirror London's move of appointing a special commander to oversee the operation. Earlier, hundreds of people, including children, have been caught crossing to southern England from makeshift camps in northern France. Britain has called for more flexibility to the EU's Dublin regulation, which currently governs the return of illegal immigrants. In Indonesia, Mount Sinabung spewed a giant ash cloud 5 kilometers into the sky in its second eruption in 3 days. It emitted a thunderous noise and turned the daytime sky dark. Dramatic footage showed a giant cloud of thick ash rising from the peak of the 2,460-meter mountain in Karo, North Sumatra. Residents and tourists have been advised to stay outside of 3-kilometer radius around the volcano. They were told to wear masks to minimize the effect of falling volcanic ash. No casualties have been reported, and a spokesperson for the Civil Aviation Authority said flights were still operating in the region. Japan says it will send a team of 6 experts to instruct and advise Mauritian authorities about the extermination of oil at the spill site. Japan's Minister for Land Transport, Kazuyoshi Akaba, said the oil spill has caused much trouble and Tokyo will respond appropriately. Akaba also said Tokyo is closely monitoring the situation. Earlier, Tokyo apologized for causing major oil spill when its ship carrying 4,000 tons of fuel ran aground in Mauritian Beach.
As the Japanese government, we have decided to send 6 experts forming an international disaster relief team. Among its members, 4 personnel from Japan Coast Guard who are members of an expert squad on prevention and extermination of oil will join the team. They will instruct and advise about the prevention and extermination of oil on the site.
Pakistan is observing National Minorities Day today to honor the services and sacrifices rendered by religious minorities for the country. Celebrations are being held across the country, keeping the COVID-19 social distancing protocols in view.
On 11th of August 1947, Pakistan's founder Muhammad Ali Jinnah laid out religious freedom, liberty, dignity, and security of all religious minorities as a core principle of the country's existence. Religious minorities have been holding key positions in Pakistan's all institutions since its existence. Since Islamabad announced 11th August as the official National Day for Minorities in 2009, the day has celebrated religious diversity in the country. To mark the day, different events including seminars and social gatherings are being arranged across the country by members of various religious minorities. In his message on the day, President Dr. Arif Alvi asked the nation to stay united through social equality and brotherhood in the society. The president said, "No country can progress unless all communities are treated equally with respect."
India's largest crocodile park can run out of funds in 4 months if lockdowns to stem the spread of the coronavirus continues in the southern city of Chennai. More about the park in this report.
The Madras Crocodile Bank Trust and Center of Herpetology in India's southern city of Chennai gets about 5 million visitors a year. The ticket sales account for 50% of the revenue. But since COVID-19 outbreak, no visitors have been allowed in the park.
Keeping the current scenario in mind, we are actually not expecting substantial income from ticket revenues. So we have actually started to raise funds to make sure that we are able to see through this entire year.
Park is the biggest crocodile sanctuary in India and one of Asia's largest, hosting over 2,000 crocodiles and alligators. Workers at the park say looking after the animals is not easy, especially with some staff under quarantine for the virus.
There are some colleagues here who are quarantining right now as well. And since the staff works on shifts, and it's been difficult because there's a lot of workload and we need our full staff to be present because we have a lot of animals here.
The park was founded by prominent herpetologist Romulus Whittaker in 1976 and has bred over 5,000 crocodiles since its inception. It is currently home to 14 of the 23 existing species of crocodiles, 3 of which are endangered.
Jordanians are venting their anger at the coronavirus pandemic by hurling axes at targets in Amman's store. More in this report.
The axe-raised rooms located in Amman provide Jordanians with creative outlets for their anger, including activities like destroying televisions and throwing plates at a wall. Axe throwing is their latest venture amid the COVID-19 pandemic.
There is a lot of interest, especially after the coronavirus, with people being stuck at home for a long time during the curfew. People wanted to engage in sports and entertainment activities such as this. We imposed many safety measures. No one can enter the area where the axes are thrown, and there is a safety gear for the face and the eyes.
Participants say this is one of their favorite new activities.
We're used to throwing darts at targets to get points, but the idea of throwing an axe at the same target is quite new. This is a great way to spend your surplus energy.
The government in March imposed a 2-month-long curfew aimed at curbing the spread of coronavirus. Jordan has so far reported more than 1,200 confirmed coronavirus cases and 11 deaths.